It's rough out there, in the world. Some of us turn to writing for solace and inspiration. Text that helps us take in the dark and find the light. So if you are someone who wraps themselves in words to warm your heart, or maybe just looking for a little help getting through the day, week, year, join us as we talk to people about the pieces of writing they use to bolster their souls and remember their way. The good bones that remind us we can make this place beautiful. Hello, and welcome to Finding Good Bones, a podcast all about the writing that helps us sit with the dark and look towards the light. I am Kate.
I am Amy.
And we are your hosts. Amy, is it towards or toward? Should I be saying toward?
Depends on if you are British. They have extra letters in everything. So toward is American, towards is British. But you know what? Nobody knows that except people who've been copy editing for 30 years. So say whatever you want.
I did a lot of the copy editing I've done has been for a British company.
Yeah. They stick like U's in the middle of it.
Like, I love those extra U's. I'm just saying. They're my absolute favorite, if you will.
The word acknowledgement, it has an E in it for some reason. We don't need an E in it over here.
Yeah, there's another one too. That just has all sorts of extra.
Well, there's backwards and forwards, and there's just I don't know why sticking those extra letters. Anyway, that's my. Welcome to copy editing.
It's the crown
with Amy. Yeah.
Amongst.
Yeah.
Right. Like we would just be among. Or amid, and they're like amongst, amidst. Anyhow, that's not the writing that we're here to talk about today. So
we can if you want, but it's not inspiring.
No. What are you reading right now?
Hang on. So I never can remember what things are called. You go ahead and tell me what you're reading, and I'll look it up.
Yeah. I believe that I'm reading A Line to Kill. I'm sorry, that came out weird. I know that I'm reading A Line to Kill. It's mystery number 3 in the Hawthorne and Horowitz murder series by Anthony Horowitz, and it's really fun because he is him. He is this series. He is the Horowitz in the Hawthorne and Horowitz, and he has created a detective. But he is writing a version of himself who is approached by a former detective, now kind of private investigator, police helper, to write books about him while he solves murders.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty fun. I'm on book 3.
Okay.
This is the same guy that did the Magpie Murders and the Moonflower Murders that I think I've talked about here.
Yeah.
So I enjoy. He's fun. He's British. So
yeah. Well,
that's where all this is coming from. Yeah.
Well,
what are you reading?
I'm reading. I'm reading a couple things. One is I'm zipping through a series. The Rivers of London series, which is also British. Have you read it?
I've not read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting world building and stuff. I like it. But the other book I'm reading, just a single book, not a series, is called The Ministry of Time, and it's an interesting thing where I don't know, we're checking into time travel, so we go back into the past and we grab up somebody who was about to die anyway and bring them forward, and it's just there's a love story. It's interesting. I like it.
It's just that you, dear listeners, please know that Amy did make a face when she mentioned the love story. That made it seem like It was maybe not interesting.
No,
Or
no.
maybe that's why she said it's interesting and not like it's good.
Well, because I'm only like a quarter of the way through, and I think the love story is going to be very essential to the story. And I just, I can't tell you. I'll tell you next time.
Yeah, we'll be sure to check in. Tune in next time for Amy's
Whether the Ministry of Time is a
opinion
love story.
of the love story portion.
Okay. Here's what's cool. Kate and I occasionally interview each other for these episodes. And today, I'm going to have Kate as a guest.
It's
Hi, Kate.
me. Hello. Hello,
Hi.
dear listeners.
My favorite guest. Okay, so Kate, what have you brought us today?
I have brought you a selection from the 1990s teen supernatural horror, but so much more series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is a selection from, or I guess I should say, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 2, Episode 21, Becoming, Part 1, by Joss Whedon. Bottom line is, even if you see him coming, you're not ready for the big moments. No one asks for their life to change. Not really. But it does. So what are we? Helpless? Puppets? No. The big moments are going to come. You can't help that. It's what you do afterwards that counts. That's when you find out who you are. You'll see what I mean.
That is a very short little reading and very important to the story. And also, you don't even need the story.
Oh, yeah.
That one is it. That one hits. So go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I mostly think about it out of context of the story. Would you like me to talk a little bit about where we are in the story?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Place us in the story, please. So
this is the second to last episode. It's really the first part of the last episode that is a 2-episode arc. Becoming, Part 1 and Part 2. And this is like I said earlier, Season 2, I think it's 1998. We don't worry about spoilers too much here on Finding Good Bones, especially for television shows that came out in the 90s. But basically the vampire man, who Buffy is like the first big love of Buffy's life, went from being like, a good, helpful force for her to being like the main evil of the second season. And of course this happened after they had sex. Such a beautiful metaphor of a teen girl's boyfriend turning evil after they have sex. Like, feels like somebody in the know put that one in there. And so next to last episode, we're getting ready for the big showdown between the two of them. And so one of the reasons why Angel was previously good is because he had this curse that was put on him to give him back his soul. And when he and Buffy had sex, he experienced a moment of true happiness. So that soul, I don't know, it feels like a really weird catch for a curse, honestly. But it's fine. Because he experienced true happiness, the curse was broken. But this was like a good curse. So the curse was broken, so he lost his soul. And now he's trying to bring about the end of the world with this demon Akathla. And he has kind of summoned Buffy away from her friends. He's been on like this killing spree, and he summoned Buffy away from her friends, and they're fighting in a graveyard, obviously. And while he's distracting her, like some of the other villains have gone in and attacked Buffy's friends, killing one of them. And so as this is being said, in the voiceover, I was like, in the overspeak, which is a voiceover. Like, we see Buffy going back to find one of her friends has been killed. And so, it is quite poignant. And we don't know, right? Because this is, we know because we've watched this a lot. But in the story, you don't know what is going to happen next. And I think that this piece of text does an excellent job of closing that episode and making that feel final, with at the same time like preparing us for what we know is coming next, which is quite a challenge, I think. So I think they did an excellent job.
I feel like we aren't going to worry about spoilers here. So is it okay to talk about the end of the next episode, the end of the season 2?
It's just that we're not I want to be careful about that line, because we're technically not a Buffy
we're not
podcast.
We're not. But this voiceover is helping Buffy understand what she's going to have to do, whether she likes it or not. And what she's going to have to do is, if Angel does end up opening the portal where the demon comes through, the only way to keep that from happening is to kill Angel.
Yeah. But
so
I've never thought about it that way. I've always seen this as being about her in that moment. Where she comes back and she finds her friends attacked and injured, and then one of her friends dead. I've never really thought about it as preparing her. I guess because it's not really said to her, right?
Yeah.
It's actually, I think it's said to Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not a Buffy podcast, so want to be careful about this line. But
so this is a good interpretation. Then I always read it because he says, "You'll see what I mean."
Yeah,
I always read it as he's letting her know that some really terrible shit's about to happen, that she's going to have to go through with the right thing.
Yeah, no, I think he's actually talking to Angel.
Interesting. What if he's talking to both? They can be.
Well, actually, here's how I've always interpreted it. Really, Amy, I think he's talking to us.
Oh,
yeah, I think he's talking to the viewer, and I think he's setting us up for seeing what he means.
Okay.
Not necessarily for us, right? Within this world and this story, what's going to happen to her. But at the same time, I've always felt like he was talking to the audience. I think within the script, in the world, like he's talking to Angel, but I've always felt it was directed out towards us, the listeners or
so
watchers.
What's he? What is he telling you?
It is pretty directly just, or what I get out of it is, especially that first line, bottom line is, even if you see him coming, you're not ready for the big moments. And as somebody who deals with anxiety, right? I do a lot of prepping for a myriad of potentially bad things, with the thought that if somehow I can see them coming, they won't affect my life as much as if I'm like blindsided, which is not true. And so I've always found that line, it's one that I come back to, that just kind of pops up into my head whenever something big happens to me. Not necessarily every time, but a lot of times. And
a big bad thing, or a big thing, or any big thing?
Okay. Usually a big bad thing. And then, no one asks. I also come back to the line, no one asks for their life to change. Not really, but it does. because I have asked for my life to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think many of us have asked for our life to change, but in a very superficial sense.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Without understanding exactly what all that entails, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wish this would change. I want to change, but not necessarily understanding the power that happens
Mm-hmm.
with a change, and kind of the tumultuousness, even if it is a good change, that can be brought. And so, you know, I that first part really says to me, like, you know, the thing about this is it's very direct, right? Like, it is what it's on the tin, but like, you know, you can think about it, you can worry about it all you want. The bottom line is that, like, even if you have seen this coming, it's still going to hit you hard. And you might have been like thinking that you wanted a change, but it doesn't mean that you're ready for this change. And then of course the sentiment of the next line, that's, you know, like, but it's not about the getting knocked down, right? Like, the change is not about, or rather, who you are isn't determined by being affected by this change, right? Good or bad. If you are knocked down, if you are bowled over, right? Like, that's not the defining part of who you are. It's how you respond. It's how you take action. And like, yeah, your power, because I think we as people find a lot of power in trying to block change, right? Or trying to not be bothered, trying to, you know, be the wall, be the unmovable wall. And that's not where necessarily, or what this line says that really resonates with me, that's not where our power is. Our power isn't in not getting knocked over. Our power is in what we can do after that happens, right? Whether that's getting back up, whether that's sometimes staying down, you know,
crawling out to the side.
Yeah, rolling, right? It can look like a lot of different things, but that's where our power is, in the response, not in the prevention or the immovability. We'll find out if that's a word.
Movability is a word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because the whole Buffy the Vampire show, the whole show has been very important for both of us. I do want to hear how you came across it, and then I think it'll be interesting also for you to hear how I came across it.
Yeah.
So what brought you to this amazing show?
Oh, well, I dabbled. So I'm like the same year as Buffy in high school.
Oh.
She's a little bit older than I am.
Okay.
But like, I was a sophomore when it came out, and she is yeah.
Okay.
Sophomore, junior, senior is seasons 1, 2, 3, and I remember it being like out. And I'd seen a couple episodes of it, but I had been a very big child fan of the movie, The Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Too.
And so I really struggled for a bit, especially like when I was in high school, of like watching it and it not being the same and it being different. And I didn't really understand that it was better. And also, like, I didn't watch a whole lot of anything in high school because I am a theater kid. And when we were doing our jobs, that is rehearsal prime during television evening watching. So I just didn't watched a lot of Nick at Night. You can tell that I'm a very cool person.
Yes. Coolest.
Watched so much Comedy Central and Nick at Night. I'd seen episodes here and there, and I thought it was funny, and I enjoyed it. And in college, I had some friends that were very, very big fans. But when I really got into Buffy the Vampire Slayer was right after I graduated from college in 2003. And I think it was actually over, but they'd started playing it in syndication on, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the channel. But it was definitely like one of those channels that played like Charmed from 2 to 4, and then Buffy the Vampire, or something like the 1 to 3, and then Buffy the Vampire Slayer was from 3 to 5. And I was at a low point, graduating with my theater degree in the summer of 2003. I was working many hours. I was working full time at a pizza place here in Austin, Texas. And my dad, who is bipolar, had hit probably one of his biggest lows, and he was missing. And so I did split shifts at the pizza place, where I would work there from like 9 to 2 in the morning, and then I'd have a couple hours off, and I'd go back from 5 to 9. Right? Or 10, or however late they needed me to stay. And this was pretty much every weekday. And then one weekend day. And so there was this block from like 2:30 to 5 where I would go to my mom's, because I didn't have internet. Because this was 2003 and it was an expense. And I didn't really have a good computer anyway. But it was an expense that like was too much, because obviously I'm working full time at a pizza place. So I'd go over to my mom's and use her dial up.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. And I just kind of research what to do what I could do, what my options were if I found my dad. And so what was playing at the time in the background, FX was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I just started kind of having it on in the background, and it really, there was so much that resonated, and then one day the very famous now episode, The Body, came on, and
while your dad is missing,
my dad is missing, it stopped me in my tracks. And even though, he was alive, so much of that taking on of responsibility, that feeling of being lost and helplessness, really, really resonated. And that's when I, like, in a way that nothing else that I'd consumed had kind of resonated, or I'd seen myself reflected in a way. And saw that, and I was like, oh, we'll be watching the show now. And I already was, but like, I will be paying attention. That was when I really started to get into it, and I watched it. And I did find my dad, and had a very wonderful but tumultuous relationship with him over the next 18 years, something like that. But that was how I started watching it. That's when I started watching it, right? Like capital W, watching it. How did you start watching it?
Okay, let me tell you. So first of all, I was done with grad school, Kate. I'm so much older than you. We wouldn't have been hanging out at the time. Probably I could have been your babysitter or something.
I definitely needed a babysitter in my early 20s, but would not have accepted you.
Anyway, so I had moved to Austin not too long before this, and I had a really, really good friend from college, and his name was Randall. And so I was married at this time. Randall wanted to come visit us, and he showed up on the bus because we're super fucking broke. No airplanes for us.
I've ridden the bus.
And he was like, we have to go to your place right now. And I was like, why? And he said, there's a season finale of a show I've been watching, and I have to see it. So we went to my place. We turned on the TV, and it was Becoming 2.
Oh, shush.
Yeah. It was the last episode of the second season when she has to fucking kill Angel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, excuse me, I shall be watching this now. Because I thought it was just a silly teen show that like, which people still think of when they talk to us. I mean, we're talking about something that's way more than 20 years old now. And we're both like, it changed our lives and it's still changing our lives. So I saw that episode and I was like, okay, how do I find start from the beginning?
And yeah, you know, dear listeners, you know, if you are of a certain age, you know that it was actually for a very long time a quandary on how to consume all of your, you know, if you get into something later on, how do you go back and watch the beginning? Because it wasn't all on, you know, I was just talking about dial-up.
Yeah. So I don't remember how I watched. I may not have caught up with it for a while, but from then on, I watch it every Tuesday night. Like that's like people had to do. You have to fucking wait.
And I watched a few episodes here and there, like before I'd really fallen in love with the reruns of it. I did. Yeah. And like some of my friends later on, when I was into it, like one of the ways I watched it was they loaned me their re-recorded it over video cassettes.
My brother got me an entire DVD set of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I watched over and over and over until
1 through 7 or
all of it after it was done, which I watched over and over until the advent of Netflix and Hulu. Yeah. Anyway, so this has been important to both of us in different parts of our lives, and I think that we see some very similar things in it. It's done similar things for us. The whole series, and also this particular piece that you're reading today. So I really think it's important that, you know, she has to kill her fucking boyfriend. And somehow we're still looking toward the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She gets put through a lot. Yeah. But it's also gradual. Yeah. You know, after she's put through something, and this is something that I appreciate of the series and of the writing, she never just bounces back. There is always what the hard things that she has had to do affect her, and they stay with her, not just her, the other characters as well. Like there are ongoing consequences for actions. Yes. And not just are there ongoing consequences, but she doesn't, it's not like she's like, okay, well, I killed my boyfriend, but I had to because he was evil and now I feel okay about it. Yeah. She runs away.
Yeah. She wears every bit of the damage emotionally all the way through the entire series. And so do the rest of them. And this is real. You know, at the end, there's light, but it's always like this weird tempered kind of light that realistically people live with. We wear all our damage. We keep going.
It's the light that's found in the darkness. It's not the light that's there no matter what.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think going back to this particular speech that's given, she runs away at the end of this episode arc, right? Like our hero, our namesake, our vampire slayer, the strongest girl in the world, right? Strongest person in the world, runs away. Can't, I believe, as she says later on in the next season, can't deal.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It doesn't stop her from staying our hero, right?
Yeah.
You know, she still is, even though she has some messy reactions to what is happening. And there's a phrase that I use in my own life whenever I get frustrated with somebody that I love who's maybe making decisions that I think are not necessarily the best, where I try and remind myself, like, don't judge this person, or don't, like, they are going through one of the hardest times of their lives. Do not pick at their actions or their choices that they're making during one of the hardest times of their lives. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. It doesn't mean that it's still a good choice, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like, everything is so hard for them. And I know what it's like when everything's hard. And I've been so lucky to have been given grace in times where I have been making terrible choices because everything's hard.
Yeah.
And
same. Yeah, same.
And so, yeah, it's just a reminder to myself, right, that, like, pass on this grace. Because that's, you know, it's been given to you. And the only way you can repay it back, I think, to the people who have given you this kind of grace is to offer it to other people when they need it.
Now we're just going to stare at each other and cry. Is that?
Oh, well, you know, you're the interviewer this time, so.
Pause for crying. Excuse me.
Crying in middle-aged woman is the subtitle of that.
Oh, yes. Okay. So is there anything else you would like us to know about this piece before we call it a podcast?
Well, there is, so there is a very specific moment, just kind of coming back, where, you know, this has popped into my head on more than one occasion. It's also popped into my head for other people. Like when I see somebody else or hear about something that somebody else is going through. But one time I can think of specifically, and I guess it kind of nicely dovetails with how I got into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But this line actually popped into my head when I found out that my dad died. So I was over at friends of ours. My husband and I were over at our friend's house for dinner during the pandemic. We were eating outside, and I had my phone on silent and, like, in my purse because I was going to be present. And I think I was 6 months pregnant. And I see they've got these French doors, and my husband had gone in the kitchen and had answered a phone call. And, like, the other three of us were out around a table eating dinner because that's what we were there to do. And I could see Alex on the phone having a very serious conversation. And I thought about all these things that it could be about that had to do with him. And I could tell that, like we all noticed outside that inside in the kitchen, like, he was very serious, and it was upsetting. And we were like, oh no, what's going on? I hope everything's okay. Right. And then he comes out and he's like, and I was like, hey, is everything okay? And he was like, no. I was like, oh no. And I was thinking, like, is it his dad? You know, is it, what has happened? Because, you know, he was called, he answered the call, and he was like, that was my brother-in-law. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, it's your dad. They think he had a heart attack. He didn't. He had pulmonary embolisms due to COVID, but we did not find that out until the autopsy was completed quite a bit of time later. But he was like, it's your dad. They think he had a heart attack in the hospital. And I was like, oh my God, is he okay? And he was like, no.
Oh.
he didn't make it. And this line in the character's voice who says it just went through my head, because
yeah,
nobody is ready for the big moments. And I was like, oh, this is a big moment.
mm-hmm.
Oh no, okay.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I stood up and I turned to our friends and I was like, well, thank you for a lovely evening. We have to go. I just wish my husband tell pregnant me that my dad has died. And they're, in as much, I felt so bad for them. Before I even felt bad for me, I was like, oh, this is so awkward. Like, oh no. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. And it's something that, because my dad was unstable for a while, this was the call that I had been expecting for, 20 years. Like I would in the early aughts and even into the teens before he got much more stable, mm-hmm. I would answer random 512 numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, what if this is somebody calling to tell me that my dad has died?
Yeah.
And then when that call actually came, I didn't even answer it. Which is, again, goes back to, like, even if you see him coming,
mm-hmm.
I had prepared for this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it still didn't change that it's change.
Yeah.
That it's so big, and I like to think about that next part too, right? Like, are we helpless? Are we puppets? No, because it's not about keeping the change from happening. It's about figuring out how to keep moving when it does, and it's certainly something that I handled imperfectly.
No one could handle that perfectly.
No. And again, that's the point of this, right? Like,
and you are bringing another life into the world at the moment.
That's a different episode, but I will say it's very challenging to wrestle with death. Or at least for me, I found a lot of challenge in wrestling with death and wrestling with grief, while at the same time trying to welcome somebody else into the world. It was a lot. It was a lot of big
mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come back to too, like when my daughter was born, it wasn't quite as succinct, but it definitely, this line came through my mind. Like, nobody's ready for it. We were definitely not ready.
Yeah.
And so, but again, I juxtapose that with, like, when I would see previews for it as a teenager, like, oh, that silly show that's not even the movie that I loved.
Yeah. And you would never expect that something from that show would be with you at the worst moment.
Yeah. At the worst moments and the best moments. And I guess I do want to take a hot minute to say, like, the author of this episode, Joss Whedon, has been, I think, very famously called out for being, shitty.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's another thing to wrestle with, right? Like the light and the dark. Like, this person who has brought so much pain to people has also created something in this world that has brought me peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And has helped me get through things. So just a quick nod. Because I think that just fits, and I know it'll come up more because authors, writers are people, and many of them lived in times, with values different than our own. And I'm not saying that about Joss Whedon, although it is really funny to me when people are like, ugh, and people thought he was a feminist, and it's like, oh, babes, We need to talk about 90s feminism because he was. Like, and he's supposed to be an ally. And it's like, he was for 90s, but like,
100%.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And again, two things can be true.
We can hold both of these concepts in ourselves, and it doesn't negate the value of this show because of the shittiness of this guy that wrote it.
Yeah. Kate?
Yeah. Is that a podcast?
This is a podcast. This has been, I have laughed and I have fucking cried a couple times. And this is it. This has been a podcast. Yes.
This has been a podcast. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Amy.
Obviously.
This is the part in the show where if we had one, we would give our recommendation for someone else for a piece that, we think that they might enjoy. We don't have one today, but I think we'll have one for the next episode.
We will. We absolutely will. Yep.
If you would like to request one for yourself or would like to join us on the show, you can go to our website, findinggoodbones.com, and there is a page to both contact us about potentially being a guest or to request a selection for yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Kate said everything perfectly, so all I could say was like, yeah. Correct.
And I guess it's time. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, me. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us as we went finding good bones.